قال النسفي رحمه الله. And Nasafi said, we're going to keep this brief here just to explain the meanings of what he's saying. قال أهل الحق, the people of the truth said, yani they say, they declare, the people of the truth declare, they hold as a position that حقائق الأشياء ثابتة, the realities of things are confirmed. That means that all these things around us, all these things that exist in the world, they're real. That's the creed of Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah. So this computer in front of me is real. This microphone, this table, for example, the air that I'm breathing, the chair that I'm sitting in, the sun, the stars, the people, the animals, all of it is real and true. وَالْعِلْمُ بِهَا مُتَحَقِّقٌ, and knowing about them is verified. They are real themselves, and knowing about them is verified. It's not that they're real, but we don't know about them really. It's not that they're not real and we imagine them. Rather, the case is that they are real and we know about them truly. That's the creed of Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah. Why is he starting here? Because he wants to prove that the world exists so that he can prove that God exists. He's starting here because he wants to prove that God exists. And to prove that God exists, he wants to prove that the world exists. خلافا للسوفسطائية, as opposed to the sophists. As-Sufisṭā'iyyah, the sophists. The sophists, that's a madhab of philosophers. Philosophy is haram. That's correct judgment. Philosophy is not a synonym for logic or reasoning. Even the word logic, you could dispute with that word if you wanted to. If we wanted to use a word that there's no dispute about it, one of them is reasoning, as opposed to logic. Philosophy is not a synonym for reasoning. Rather, philosophy is a mental craft. It's like a game. The base of it is to deem the mind the ultimate authority. A true practitioner of philosophy, a philosopher is not merely a thinker. A true practitioner of philosophy, he puts his mind as the authority, not the Quran, not the Sunnah, not any revealed book, and not any prophetic hadith. For a philosopher has priority over the mind. There's several schools of philosophers. Amongst them is this school, the sophists. They believe things aren't real. That's where you get the inspiration for the Matrix movie. So that's taken from old philosophy. And it's one of the weakest madhabs of philosophy, by the way.
Okay.
Because they're saying things aren't real. So the scholars said, how do you refute someone like that? Smack him and take his money. This world is gharur, or ghurur is an illusion. Yani, it doesn't mean it's not real, but there is a deception about it. It is, from a physical standpoint, it's real. But what did the Prophet say, alayhi salatu wasalam? He said, had this world been worth the wing of a mosquito, Allah would not have let the kafir get a sip from it. Well, people think this world is worth a lot. Well, nice trees, nice sunshine, beautiful butterflies. In the Quran, Allah told us that had it not been that it would lead all the people to kufr, he would have given the kuffar houses of gold, and he would have given them elevators and all sorts of decorations. That means this dunya is not worth a lot, really, in reality. So things are real, that's for sure. We confirm that. And Allah confirms that when He says, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Praise be to Allah, Lord of the worlds. So He confirms the existence of the creations. And He confirms His own existence too in this ayah. Well,
Because the existence of Allah is necessary.
Yes. Well, the existence of Allah is necessary, that's true. Not that here in this ayah He confirmed His existence because it's necessary. Yani, rather, what we're saying is this ayah is proof. It is a documentary proof that Allah exists and that the creations exist too. Because there's two types of proofs: rational proof and documentary proof. When we say the existence of Allah is necessary, that's a rational proof. That's what you say to a person who doesn't believe in Allah and His Messenger, and he doesn't believe in the Quran.
Okay.
You tell him when he's an atheist or something else, you tell him the existence of the Creator is necessary. You don't have to recite an ayah for him here. And you give him rational arguments. But what if someone said, do you have an ayah? Spare me your rational arguments. Do you have an ayah from the book of Allah? Tell him, Allah says, among many ayahs, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Here, He confirms His own existence and the existence of the creations. وَأَسْبَابُ الْعِلْمِ لِلْخَلْقِ ثَلَاثَةٌ. And the reasons for knowledge, the reasons of knowledge for the creations are three. Asbabul ilm, the reasons of knowledge, the causes of knowledge. That means what makes knowledge occur in your created self? What makes you, as a creation, a vessel for knowledge? Knowledge is something that exists, really. It's an attribute, knowledge. It doesn't fill its own space, but it does exist. What causes you to be a vessel for this existing attribute? The author says, thalatha, three things. Al-hawasu salima, sound senses. Sound senses as opposed to unsound senses. Sound senses, which he's going to name them, they promote knowledge for you. In fact, they promote a type of knowledge called necessary knowledge, granted knowledge. That's basically knowledge you can't even fight off from yourself. What if you heard somebody knocking on the door? Bang, 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 bang. You can't say to yourself, oh, I don't even know what that is. Let me just keep doing what I'm doing. You know it. There's nothing that can stop you from knowing that. You can't push it away from yourself. Or what if someone's standing right there in the room with you and you can see them? You wouldn't say, oh, I'm just going to make myself not see that person right there. You can't even stop yourself. So that's a granted knowledge. Yani, it's going to be born in you automatically by way of your sound senses.
Can you back up a bit? You said
Yeah.
Causes of M, and what's the third one?
The causes of knowledge, there are three of them. We're just mentioning the first one now.
Okay, sound senses.
Yes.
Granted knowledge.
It gives you granted knowledge.
Okay.
Granted here means automatic. Or you could use necessary knowledge. Like if you was to argue with someone, debate with someone, and then he tells you something very obvious, you might say, well, that's granted. Means this, that's automatic. Everybody knows that. You don't even need to make that point. That's what we mean by granted here. If somebody came and banged on your door, bang, 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 bang. You can't say, I don't know what that is. Because you're going to know what it is. You can't stop yourself from knowing what it is. That's a knowledge that's born in you automatically. That's called ilm daruri, necessary knowledge. You're going to get that by sound senses. As opposed to what? What's like not sound senses? Like sometimes some things will compromise, make your senses compromise, so you can't rely on them for knowledge. Like if you're under the oppressive heat of the sun in the desert, then you might think you see an oasis there. You're going to run so you can jump into a sand dune, think you're about to jump into some water. It'd be like you're in a Bugs Bunny cartoon or something. So here, you don't have sound senses. Your senses are compromised. What you think you see is not there, so you don't really have knowledge here in this case. That's why we said sound senses. And this also excludes some things like perceiving through a filter. That's going to include like microscopes and telescopes.
Okay.
So seeing, cells or whatever, things of very microscopic level, things you can't see with the naked eye. That's not counted as seeing something by sound senses. Because you have a filter here now. Had it not been for that filter, you wouldn't even see it, for example. Basically, when you look through that filter, you basically see it bigger than it really is, right? That's what makes it visible to you. So the fact that you're seeing it bigger than it really is means this is not mere sound senses. Because if you're seeing something bigger than it really is, it means you're not seeing it as it is. You understand?
Yes.
Same thing with a telescope. You look through a telescope, look at the moon, or you look at something else. Someone might say, "Oh, look, you can see all the details. This is even better." But this is not the sound senses we're talking about, because now you're seeing it closer than it really is.
Yeah.
So that means you're not really seeing it as it is. We're talking about seeing something as it is. There's no illusion there. There's no filter or something. There's nothing to trick your senses or compromise them. This is important here, because this is Islamic knowledge here. Muslims didn't take this from the kuffar. They didn't take this from the philosophers. This is the knowledge of Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah. According to this, then you're going to debunk a lot of things just by this alone. We didn't even say the second and third type yet. This is sound senses. So, for example, like what? Did anyone ever see a dinosaur? Not a single one of us. Someone might say, "Well, you saw the bones. You saw whatever plaster skeleton they put there for you. You never saw a complete dinosaur skeleton." Well, I went to the museum. They're not going to ever show you the real thing they have. Never. What they have on display is not the actual skeleton they claim that they dug up. You never saw a dinosaur. None of us ever did. That's one example. I'll give you another example. The earth spinning, and none of us ever saw that. Or I'll give you another example. The center of a star. The kuffar claim they know what's in the center of a star. How they know what's in the center of a star? By guesses in reality. At the end of the day, it's because they're guessing. They don't really know what's in the center of a star. Or like what? Evolution. No one ever saw evolution. So Kafir might say, "Well, it's a process that takes millions of years." Okay. So then you're supporting my argument. You never saw evolution. You never saw one type of creature turn into another. And I'll give you another example. Human eggs. Nobody ever saw something like that. Not with sound senses, I mean.
Yeah.
not with sound senses. What do we see? Which is what the religion told us about. We see ejaculated fluid of men and women. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught us that the babies are created from the mixture of those two. He didn't say the babies are created from a sperm and an egg. He told us the babies are created from the mani of the man and the mani of the woman. Mani, not egg. And I'll give you one more example, like gravity. Someone will say, what you mean we never saw gravity? You see gravity all the time. Why you think that if this thing falls down, tell them that's not seeing gravity. That's seeing something fall down. That's two different things. Is the thing itself gravity? No. According to you, is the thing itself gravity? No. Okay. Is the falling of the thing itself, is that gravity? The falling of the thing, that thing's descent from higher to lower, is itself gravity? No, not by your definition. So this gravity that you're talking about is something no one ever saw before or experienced by any senses in any way. So what is it then? It's a theory. And really it is a theory. Officially, gravity is a theory according to scientists who believe in it. They believe in their theories, by the way. They'll call it a theory because they know they don't have definitive evidence for it. But since they don't have more evidence to prove to the contrary, they will believe it until they get something else. That's how they go. So one of the causes of knowledge is sound senses. So all those things I just told you, that's stuff none of us ever saw before. No one can verify by way of any senses. As opposed to just seeing the earth where it is, the earth is confirmed. That part's confirmed. Moving, though, we don't have no sensual evidence for that. And we don't see it, we don't feel it, nothing. Because it doesn't move, actually. So that's the first cause of knowledge. Sound senses. He's going to list the senses for you. He says, وَالْخَبَرُ الصَّادِقُ, and truthful information. Truthful information causes knowledge for you. But what is truthful information? He's going to explain that. This is closely linked to the science of hadith, because that's the point of science of hadith, to verify news or to discredit it. In particular, the news from the Prophet ﷺ, but any other news too. So sometimes a hadith is weak. That doesn't mean the Prophet didn't say it, though. Sometimes a hadith is sahih. That doesn't mean the Prophet said those words, though. Sometimes a hadith is reported by one person. That doesn't mean that it's false. Sometimes it's reported by two people. That doesn't mean that it's true. So he's going to tell us, what does truthful information mean? But when we get to it, he's going to explain. But in the meantime, this is a premise. A second cause of knowledge is truthful information. So if we assume that the information that you received is true, then you got knowledge. Whether it's true or not, that requires investigation. It's clear?
Clear.
And then the third cause of knowledge is al-aql, the intellect or the mind. But let's back up real quick too here. Wal-khabaru sadiq, truthful information. So truthful information has its conditions we're going to talk about. But let's look back even at some of the examples we just took already. Dinosaurs. Was that transmitted to us through authentic transmission? It was not. We don't have any authentic transmission about that. How did we get news about that? Some people claim that they found, and at the beginning of the issue, partial skeletons, of petrified skeletons, that is. Stone, now it's stone. It's not bone anymore. It's stone now. That's what they say. Petrified skeletons that they excavated And they were partial. And as far as I know, they never found a complete skeleton, but maybe by now they have claimed so. But for many, many, many years, they never claimed that they found a complete dinosaur skeleton. They find something that they find and they fill the rest in. I used to love dinosaurs. Once when I was a kid, I started growing out of it because I used to follow that, and they kept updating it. It was getting more ridiculous to me. I remember the first update that wasn't too bad for me. They said, because they used to depict dinosaurs as being green or brown or something like that. Then they said perhaps dinosaurs had many colors. We don't know. So I said, well, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, maybe they did. So now that's how they always show when you see movies now. They give them different colors and stuff. They didn't used to. They used to always just be brown or green. Then they said, dinosaurs, we think that they walked with erect tails. And I was like, huh? That's weird. Why are all these dinosaurs just going to be walking around with their tails erect? And then that's how they started depicting them. The Brontosaurus, Tyrannosaurus, doesn't matter. Every one of them had a stiff tail. It didn't work for me. I was like, it's so weird. Why would they have a stiff tail? MashaAllah. Then I went to a museum once, and all this is while I'm little. So they showed us the display. They told us they don't have the real skeleton on display. I said, can we see it? And the lady was like, of course not. She was looking at me like I was a moron. Of course you can't see it. I said, well, how do we know this is real? She says, this is real. But not the display. She admitted that it's plaster. What they have on display in museums is plaster. She admitted that that's plaster. They will admit that. I don't know personally. I haven't been to every museum, but any museum that has that stuff, if you go there, they're going to tell you these displays are made of plaster. It's not the authentic, whatever they claim that they dug up out of the ground. So I asked her, can we see what you have in the vault? She's like, no. I said, how are we going to know it's real? She said, it's real. So I was like, I'm not buying this stuff. And then they kept going. Now they're saying maybe they have feathers and stuff like that. They don't know. They don't really know. They're guessing the whole time. So, wal aql, and the intellect, is the third way of achieving knowledge. The intellect, the scholars defined it in different ways. Some of them said it's an attribute that Allah installed in humans, angels, and genies, by which they can distinguish between good and bad. So this is something the animals don't have. Some of them said the intellect is an attribute by which, I'm paraphrasing here, it's an attribute that what it basically does, its function is to process the input from your senses and to process ideas. It enables you to theorize, to make assumptions and to draw conclusions. And others said other things about the intellect. Okay. The naql, which is the religious documentation. The naql has priority over the aql. That's true, because we're talking about revelation here. In particular, when we say naql, we mean Quran and the sunnah of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, the revelation.
Yeah.
And what follows the revelation is the consensus. The consensus is based on revelation. It's always going to be correct. So this is the documentary evidence here. This documentary evidence has priority over the intellect. But the intellect's relation to this documentary evidence is that it verifies it. Because this revelation is, according to the intellect, it's correct. So, Yani, the revelation came. This information from God came. It has belief and it has rules. So when the sound mind looks into this set of rules here, these beliefs and rules, these principles here, when the sound mind looks into them and investigates them and analyzes them, he will find it all correct. Yani, it's a witness. That's what the scholars say. They say, Al-aqlu shahidun shara. The intellect is the religious law's witness. So it means there's nothing in our religion that's contrary or unapproved by the mind. As opposed to...
And the Wahhabis, they lied on us. Ahl Sunnati wal Jamaat, Asharis wal Maturidiyya. They say that we put the Akul before the Naqul. They lied on that.
Correct. That's a lie on their part, and what motivated them to tell that lie, or what it was that triggered their understanding that made them think that that's what we do, is the fact that they don't even use their minds. All he did was present religious texts without thought, and then impose on us some literal meanings that are not rational. And they told us we're obligated to believe in these literal meanings even if they're not rational. And we say to them, wait, these texts, those are fine. We like those. But your explanation is not sound. These texts have another meaning, not what you say. So then they say, huh? You think your mind has priority over these texts? So we're saying to them, that's not what we're saying at all. We're saying these texts are fine, but your interpretation is wrong because they're not sound. So to them, that means, so you want your mind over the text. The text is not good enough for you. We're saying the text is good enough. But basically, for you, the mind is not even having any value. There's no difference between you and a Christian. Except that the Christian uses a perverted book. That's the difference. You, Wahhabi, you don't use a perverted book. The Christian does use a perverted book. But that's where the difference is. Otherwise, it's the same. Because the Christian is the one who says, well, there's a Trinity. 3 and 1 are the same. And the Father, he is the Son. And the Son, he's the Father. Mm-hmm. So then if you told him, that's irrational, he'd say, don't you know what's in the Bible? You need to believe in the Bible. Look what the Bible says. What he means is, don't be an intellectual. As if he's saying, be a dummy like me. Just take the text as it appears. Yeah, just take the text. And that's it. That's good enough for you. So that's not our case. So then he starts. He says, فَالْحَوَاسُ وَالْحَوَاسُ خَمْس. It's missing. The word khams is missing here. وأسباب العلم للخلق ثلاثة الحواس السليمة والخبر الصادق والعقل فالحواس خمس. There's a missing word there. 5. Now that's the benefit of memorizing. When you memorize, then you're going to know what's there or what's not there. That's why you can't just learn from books. You won't know what's missing or what's added or what's altered. So he says 5 senses, but the word 5 is missing here. Khams is missing here. It should be there. فَالْحَوَاسُ خَمْس. The senses are 5, and then he named them. As-sam' hearing. والبصر sight, والشم smelling, والذوق tasting, واللمس feeling. So hearing, what's that? Hearing is, we talk about for creations.
Yeah.
Hearing is a power that Allah creates in us. It is our realization of sounds by way of our ears. Two bodies will come together and make a sound. The air around those bodies, when they come together, the air around those bodies adapts to that sound. And then it spreads. The air spreads. It's not the sound that moves, it's the air that moves. The sound does not move. They say the speed of sound, it's not the sound that moves really, it's the air. The air will move and then reach your ear canal. And then Allah will create in you a perception, a realization, which is hearing. Basar, sight. That's a power that Allah creates in you. That because there's light between your eye and what you see, Allah will create a perception in you. Yani you will perceive motion or stillness or shape or color or distance by this power. So for hearing, you need air. For sight, you need light as a creation. Shem is smelling. Smelling is a power that Allah creates in you, also by way of air. A body would have an odor, whatever that odor may be, and the air around the body adapts to the odor, and then the air moves, the air spreads out. So also it's not the smell that moves, it's the air that moves. Then the air will get to your nostrils, and those nostrils, they link to your brain, also your eyes, they link there. And Allah will create in you a realization, a perception of an odor. And a dhawq is flavor, tasting. Tasting is a power that Allah creates in your tongue. If something that has a flavor contacts the nerves of your tongue while you have saliva on your tongue, then you will realize something, which is the flavor. So the conductor here is the saliva. And the fifth one is lems, touching or feeling. So by this sense, this is a power that Allah creates in nerves that are spread all throughout your body. By that, you can detect temperature, texture, and other things. And you will know if you're hungry or the like, or if you have to go to the bathroom. So these are the five senses. Therefore, what this author mentioned, because when we say this is Aqidah, this is Al-Aqidatu Nasafiyya, the Nasafi creed. Imam An-Nasafi is saying, this is what all the Muslims believe. Just like what Tahawi is saying. In his booklet, he's basically saying, this is what all the Muslims believe. In any Aqidah book, that's what the author is claiming. Correctly or incorrectly. He's claiming, this is what all the Muslims believe. So An-Nasafi here, he's claiming that all the Muslims believe in five senses, and that's a correct claim. It's not a false claim. And by saying five, He says, khams, 5 senses. This is a denial then that there's a 6th sense. As if he's saying, Muslims do not believe in a 6th sense. And that's correct. There is no 6th sense. That's what philosophers believe. That's from philosophy. Some 6th sense. It's an ambiguous one. They call it the 6th sense. Or they might call it extrasensory perception. This 6th sense, aka extrasensory perception, has no evidence. So we don't believe in it. It doesn't have any Islamic fundamentals. If a person learns the Aqidah properly, then amongst what he needs to know firmly is that our religion has its own fundamentals. We here are not relying on the kuffar for anything we are saying. The way kuffar define things, the way they categorize things, that's their own stuff. We might mention it for comparison or for contrast, but we're not taking from them. So there's no religious Islamic evidence for this 6th sense. That means, in other words, though, that in reality there is no evidence. We can say there's no Islamic evidence for that. Like, if you're debating with a philosopher here, you might want to be, let's say, objective. So you might say there's no Islamic evidence for it, as opposed to saying to him, there is no evidence for it. You could say that, but then he's going to say, what? What do you mean there's no evidence? We have evidence. And then you're going to argue with him about whether his evidence is valid or not. Or you could just cut him off there and say, there's no Islamic evidence for that, so we don't verify it. And you say, oh, that's interesting. Well, our evidence is, you're still going to wind up refuting him, though. Because you're going to say, well, really, that's not evidence. Your conjectures, that's not evidence. Your guesses, that's not evidence. You see the way the kuffar talk too. Like, going back to this dinosaur thing, I remember once I heard one talking. He was saying, now scientists actually know, or scientists know that actually the Tyrannosaurus Rex was, so the way he's talking, like they know it for sure. They have now achieved knowledge, and they have no idea in reality. They're just guessing. So a lot of Muslims, they give to the kuffar more credit than they should about a lot of things. And they don't give Islam enough credit. They might think Islam is some archaic, medieval pseudoscience or something. This is real science from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He says here, وَبِكُلِّ حَاسَةٍ مِّنْهَا يُوقَفُ عَلَى مَا وُضِعَتْ هِيَ لَهُ. And every sense, every one of those senses discovers, detects. Every one of those senses detects what it was put for. كَالسَّمْعِ وَالذَّوْقِ وَالشَّمْ. Like hearing, it detects sounds. That's what Allah created it for originally. And tasting, it detects flavors. And shem, smelling, it detects smells, odors. That's what Allah created them for normally. But that's only the norm. And it's not necessary. Meaning, these senses don't create anything. And our organs don't create anything. If Allah willed, the very thing that's right in front of your face could be neon, right in front of your face. If Allah willed, you will not see it. Could be moving and glowing. If Allah willed, you will not see it. These senses don't create anything. How is it that the angel of death comes when it's time for any one of us to die? And that one who's dying, he's the one who sees the angel of death. The angel of death is right there. He can see the angel, and everybody else around cannot. But if Allah willed, they would. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he saw Allah with his heart, not with his eyes.
No.
So then that proves what Ahlul Sunnah believes, that what these senses detect is merely normal, not necessary. Because the heart doesn't normally detect like a sense in the first place. It's not a sensing organ. But if Allah created in your heart the power of sight, then it will see. And if He created in any limb, any power, then it will be so. If He created in your arms the power of hearing, then you will hear by your arms, for example. Let's stop there.